On the liability side, total liabilities were $314,879, which then leaves you with a total fund balance of $154,510. Of that $154,000, you can see up above there, $94,532 was your unreserved fund balance. So that would be your general fund kind of unreserved carryover into the next year. The next page, page 11, is the statement of revenues and expenses, again, just for the general fund only. Total revenues there, $1,473,000. As you can see, almost half of that was in the form of property taxes, $695,000. Licenses and permits was the second highest revenue category there at $365,000. On the expenditure side, in the middle of the page, total expenditures were $1.9 million, $1,963,000. And you can see the breakdown there between the various departments or functions of the city: general government, police, fire, on down the line. You can see there, police is the largest category of those at $714,959, which would probably be no surprise to all of you. Down at the bottom there is the interest and other revenue, and then the transfers in from the sewer and utility fund. And after all of that is said and done, leaves you with a deficit for the year in the general fund of $23,028. The same comparable statements for the proprietary funds, which are your utility fund and sewer fund, start on page 14. Again, page 14 is your assets and liabilities and fund balance, if you will. You can see there total assets for all funds, $14.7 million. Now, sounds like a big number. You can see up above there, of that $14.7 million, $11.5 million was in the form of capital assets. So that's all the equipment and whatnot to run those systems. Your other assets were $3.1 million, with the largest balance in that section consisting of customer accounts receivable at $1,484,000. On the liability side, total liabilities for these funds was $4.1 million. And the largest component of that was long-term liabilities. You have some bonds on some of the projects that you did a few years back. That balance there, the long-term portion, is $2.5 million. Up above that, you can see the accounts payable and other current liabilities, interest payable, etc. Which then leaves you with a total net asset balance of $10.5 million. Again, comparing it to the general fund, your carryover, if you will, is the unreserved line there in that net assets section, which is $1,541,000. Page 15 is a summary of the revenues and expenditures. Expenses for these funds, again, just the utility and the sewer fund. Total operating revenues, $8,568,000. The largest component of that is in the electric service category at $5.5 million. Water services, $1.4 million. Cable was $793,000, and sewer was $667,000. On the expense side, total operating expenses, $7.5 million, with personnel services and also contractual services making up about 80% of that number. Contractual services is the largest component of that, and that's primarily the electric contract is the biggest component of that number. Down below there is your other income and expenses, interest and grants, and interest expense, and then transfers, which leaves you with a net change in net assets for all of those funds of $975,000 for the year. Back behind that are all of the notes to the financial statements. A lot of narrative in here on the city's accounting policies. All of these are required to be in here by generally accepted accounting principles. I won't go through each of them. I'll just point out a couple that may be a little more meaningful to you. Note 5, which is found on page 22. This shows the activity from last year to this year of the capital assets. The top half of the page is your governmental capital assets, primarily consisting of this building and then the city's streets and sidewalks. You can see their balance at the beginning of the year, $3.4 million. Added $117,000 of new assets. Took depreciation expense of $192,000. So that resulted in a net decrease of $74,000. Bottom half of the page is the capital assets for the utility fund and the sewer fund. Balance at the beginning of the year, $11.5 million. The current year additions were $864,000, but the depreciation in the current year was $895,000. So that was about a wash, slight decrease there. And your ending balance was $11.5 million. Note 6, which starts on page 23, just shows you the details of the bond obligations that are outstanding. You can see there's 2 utility system revenue bonds there. Again, total balance on those $2,470,000 as of June 30th. That's it in terms of a summary. I guess the last thing I'll mention, I forgot to mention earlier, the independent auditor's report, which is our opinion on the statements, and a clean opinion, unqualified opinion is the term for it, which means the statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's the key piece of information that you want to take away from this. In the back of the statements, there's a lot of supplemental information. Just kind of goes into a lot more of the detail in terms of the numbers that I already talked about. So if you want to look at the components of anything, it's probably back in the back. In addition to the spiral bound packet, I also handed out a letter, a stapled letter. There are certain communications that we as auditors are required to make to you every year concerning the audit. Some of those have to do with whether we had any disagreements with management, and we had none. Some of them have to do with aspects of your accounting practices, your significant accounting policies, significant estimates. Again, whether we had any other audit findings or issues. This letter is saying that we did not have any audit findings, that we did not have any disagreements with management. If we did, again, we'd be required to tell you that in this letter. So. Questions about the audit in general, any of the numbers? Sure.
Page 23, in your note 6, probably in the second paragraph there, the last sentence, I haven't